Just another fraternal message of support from Helen Black, the Regional Secretary of Unison. She says, Unison members know only too well what the impact of privatisation is on public services and public service workers. Poorer services delivered by fewer staff employed on worse terms and conditions, and they call that modernisation. Well, Unison members are with you in your fight not to let this happen to Royal Mail. And I know CW members will be with us in our attempts in the weeks and months ahead to defend our other vital public services on which our communities depend. We can't let this happen, and we won't let this happen without a fight. I hope the rally is a resounding success, and sorry once again that I can't be here. Thanks, Adam. So I'd now like to hand over to Nick Palmer, who's a former Labour MP for Broxtowe. Nick.
Well, first, welcome to Broxtowe for those of you who aren't based here, and welcome to the 10th most marginal Conservative seat in Britain. It's pity that Anna Soubry can't be here today, but I understand that she's catching up on her correspondence. As many of you know, I was an MP during the period that a partial privatisation was being considered, and I'd like to say what turned me against it and why I told the whips that I wasn't prepared to support it. Firstly, it became very rapidly clear to me that the impact, even of partial privatisation, was going to be substantial layoffs, reduction in service and an increase in price. Otherwise, it wasn't going to make sense for a private partner. Second, it was clear that the link to the post office counters, that is, to the local post offices in every town and village in the constituency, would sooner or later come under pressure, and we would start to see post offices closing, not because of lack of interest in their services, but because they were unable to meet the terms of a new part-private post office. Third, it is one of the very few national services which we have still got. We talk a lot about, in vague terms, about the community, about the big society and all the rest of it. But even in countries like America, they've seen the necessity of keeping some services public and joint for the whole community. Because if you splinter up everything, you end up losing that sense of cohesion which every country needs. But finally, I went back to listen to the constituents who I represented. I listened to my constituency Labour Party, who passed a resolution asking me to oppose it, and I listened to the many people who wrote to me about it. And it's possible for politicians to ignore the letters and phone calls and emails that they get and just carry on regardless in Westminster. It's the kind of politics which puts people off politicians of all parties. And I'm proud that in the end, many Labour MPs like me persuaded the Labour government that it had gone wrong and that we needed to withdraw the proposal because it was against the interests of the country. Ultimately, the test of a good government is not that it gets everything right. The test of a good government is that it listens when it gets something wrong. Now, in the coming months, the question is how we are going to get this government to think again. And there are two things which you can do. I've been asked to speak briefly, so I'll cut it quite short. First, support the joint trade union effort, including the big demonstration next month. Let's make it memorable. Let's make people realise that it isn't just postal workers on their own, it isn't just Unison members on their own. It is a broad feeling that we will not be divided among ourselves, but we will work together to persuade the government and the public that these cuts are a mistake, that ultimately they will do huge damage to our community as a whole. And if you support the march next month, you'll be doing us all a great favour, whether you're in the postal service or any other part of the community. The second is that ultimately, even ostrich politicians realise that they depend on votes. And in May, we have all-out elections in Broxton, we have all-out elections in Nottingham and in many other places. And if you are canvassed in the next 3 months, and I think you will be, certainly if you live in Broxton, you're likely to be canvassed by Conservatives and by Lib Dems, tell them that unless they think again on this postal service bill, you are not going to vote for them. And they'll say to you, yes, but that's nothing to do with the local council elections. But the fact is that if in May the Conservatives and Lib Dems lose seats up and down the country, they are going to be ringing their local organisers and say, what happened? Why did that happen? And if they get the message back, a great many people on the doorstep told us that they really objected to the post office privatisation. That's a message that will make people sit up in both the Conservatives and the Lib Dems, because ultimately, for all of them, votes count, and especially votes in marginal seats like this one. So please don't treat all politicians as the same. Some of us work to listen to what our constituents say. Some of us have spent a long time trying to get it right, and it is only if we work through the process to persuade the broad public and persuade people to vote, take part, and actually get change that we can actually defeat this bill and defeat the threat to public services across Britain. Finally, if we are successful, it will be the fourth time that the privatisation has been defeated. It will be something that we can all be proud of, because we'll have passed on to the next generation a tradition that goes back hundreds of years. And we do not want to be the first generation that gives it up, loses the universal service, and loses the public postal service for the British people. Thank you for your support today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Nick. This one, a message of support. I have a message of support received from Alan Mill, Labour MP for Mansfield. Alan is sorry that he's unable to be at the march and rally today due to other commitments, but wishes to make clear his continuing support for the Keep the Post Public campaign and to confirm his outright opposition to any proposals to break up and privatise Royal Mail, regardless of the government of the day. On this point, and on behalf of the CDU Nottingham District Tamal, I'd like to thank Alan Mill and indeed all the local MPs in the branch area, not least of course Lillian and Greewood, who have fully supported our campaign and activities over the last few months, not least of which handing in to number 10 Downing Street a petition signed by over 15,000 people back in Notts in January this year. Which brings me neatly into Lillian Greewood.
To say first that I was really proud to join the march today and to be marching alongside fellow trade unionists from the CWU and from many other unions, and also members of the Labour Party, as part of this fantastic campaign to keep the post public. Now, I know what a fantastic work our postal service workers do, and when I went to visit the delivery office in Nottingham just before Christmas, and we'd had that dreadful weather, and I could see how people went the extra mile to make sure the public got their Christmas presents and got their Christmas deliveries. And I was very proud to go out with Darren and other CWU members, and we went out on the streets in Clifton collecting signatures for the petition to keep the post public. and there was just overwhelming support from the public. So it's quite clear to me, people queuing up to come and sign the petition, that people did not vote for this. And we all know what this privatisation will mean. And I won't say it again, but it is the potential loss of our whole post office network and the universal service. But what I wanted to talk about was that the sad truth is that this government has launched a sustained attack, not just on the Royal Mail and postal workers, but on our entire public services and public service workers. And they've done this under the cover of making swinging cuts to tackle the deficit. A deficit that was caused not by hard-working public service workers, not by postmen and women, but by greedy and irresponsible bankers. And let's nail that Tory lie. In 2008, the world economy was close to meltdown, and Ireland and Greece and Spain and France and the United States all saw their economies in real trouble and deficits rise. Well, my question is, how could those deficits be down to us spending money on our NHS and on our schools and on decent housing? Well, they just couldn't be, could they? The deficit was unavoidable, but their choices that they're making now, their choice to privatise the Royal Mail, threatening all our services. Their choice to try and reorganise the entirety of our National Health Service, opening every bit up to privatisation with no regard to patients and their care. It's their choice to make thousands of public service workers redundant, to be scrapping support for young people by getting rid of the Future Jobs Fund and educational maintenance allowance for disadvantaged youngsters at exactly the same time that youth unemployment hits record levels. And of course, making absolutely devastating cuts across our county to our public services. Not because they have to, but because they want to. Now, we know that their plans are too far and too fast, that they risk pushing our economy back into deficit, back into recession. They shouldn't be cutting our vital services. They should be cutting tax avoidance by millionaires. But when we've got a cabinet, 22 millionaires in our cabinet, no wonder that's not what they're doing. And of course, we're going to see over the next few weeks bankers getting millions and millions in bonuses. Well, what about in the time that we did something about that? So they had their choices, and every time they made the wrong ones. So our message to government has to be today, these may be your choices, but they aren't ours. We're showing you what we think today, and what a fantastic turnout we've had. And we'll show them again, and I'll remind people who might be thinking about it, that there'll be a by-election in Barnsley on the 3rd of March, and your support will be very much appreciated there. And I know that we'll all be there in London on the 26th of March to show them once more. But the most and we've got another opportunity, and we've already talked about it when we have the local elections on the 5th of May. And it's a great opportunity to make politicians listen. And let's kick out the local Tories and Lib Dems across Nottinghamshire on that day. Now, I think it's really fantastic. Today's march was jointly between the CWU and the Labour Party. And I know that we haven't always been able to stand side by side and fight over the last few years, but I think now is the time to unite and fight. And for all our sakes, it's a fight we need to win. Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian. Just a bit of information. Gav, the queue for the chips has gone down, so we can get in there. Sorry.